When it comes to Atari, and especially the Jaguar, I see a lot of negativity and jokes about how poor these games are in the comments and elsewhere. I can't help but to wonder if people just don't know about the good stuff, or if it's just funner to join the bandwagon and slam into these consoles for being, quote, terrible, unquote. When I grab a console, and especially back in the day, I intended to find and play as many good games as possible. So the first time I owned a Jaguar, I did a lot of homework to figure out what was worth owning and what to skip. And of course, I found the stuff that everybody talks about. The incredible for the time Alien vs. Predator, the great ports of Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, Tempest 2000, which is the first and so far only game to get a perfect score on the channel by the way, and so forth. But if you look just a bit deeper, you'll start hearing people mention Power Drive Rally. I've heard it mentioned as a hidden gem, and one of the Jaguar's best kept secrets from back in the day. And to be honest, the game is right up my alley in just about every way possible. I love rally racing games, I love overhead racing games, and I love digging deep into a console's library to find the gold beneath. So let's dig into Power Drive Rally, and see if this can join the pantheon of great overhead racers, or if it'll get buried in the dirt behind better rally games. As stated before, Power Drive Rally is an overhead rally racing game developed by a company called Rage Software and published by Time Warner in late 1995. The game is apparently a conversion of a 1994 racing game called Power Drive that was released on the SNES, Mega Drive, Amiga, and a few others. It appears to have mostly been made available in the EU and Brazil, but there was a Genesis version available on the Sega channel. So for us Yanks, well, we aren't too familiar with the original. But we got the Jaguar version late into the console's life, and the Jag has a pretty rough track record with racing games. And things don't look too promising to start. The menu is very bare bones with just a few choices. You can practice, start a new game, load a game, and, well, that's it really. Pressing options allows you to adjust one or two things like the control layout, but that's really about it, which is disappointing. You can practice, but to be honest, there isn't much value there. So the main game is going to have to carry us the rest of the way, and we'll need some serious horsepower to do so. When starting the main game, you enter your initials and select between two licensed vehicles, a Fiat or a Mini Cooper. Depending on which vehicle you choose, you'll either start broke or with a little bit of play money, and you're going to need all the cash you can get to buy into events, fix your vehicle, and purchase different cars later on in the game. And that adds a nice sense of progression. Then you're dropped right into the events, and I have to say, this baby plays exactly like an arcade racing game should, and I love it. Each car has their own steering, acceleration, and top speed, but in general, they all can usually handle pretty well. You don't need to have a deep understanding of driving and racing games to perform well in the beginning, which is a nice touch. It definitely felt good getting into the first few events, but I have a feeling that there are some elements that not everybody is going to appreciate. First off, the controls are pretty solid, but with one caveat. By default, B, or the middle button, is for acceleration. You can push C to apply the brakes, but for the most part, and especially early on, you can floor the pedal to the metal all through the turns and the whole course. But you will need to know where the brake is for later on. The issue comes when using the A button for reverse, because it doesn't work the way you would immediately think. Most people would hold down A to go backwards, but what it actually does is shifts your rally racer into reverse. You then have to apply the gas or press the B button to start moving backwards. It makes sense if you really think about it, but in practice it feels quirky and a little too cute. It would make more sense if you had to manually shift into the rest of the gears, but for a game that's an arcade racer in just about every other aspect, this realistic sort of feature just feels out of place. But despite all that, the game controls very well, even going in reverse when you get used to it. And you'll want to have the hang of it after a couple races, because you're going to be entered into a sort of obstacle course called a skill test. It can be intimidating at first, because like everything else, you're not given a ton of directions. The game goes for a sort of clean aesthetic, where you have to rely on brief arrows above your car and your spotter to know what turns are coming up on the course. You don't have a full map of the track, like a lot of games opt to use. But it's fine because I love listening to the cues and following the directions from my spotter. Again, this game is meant to be arcade fun, but this aspect of realism doesn't bother me at all. Anyway, we need to get back to this skill test I started talking about. So you have some drawings on the ground to give you very basic instructions. You'll need to start and then stop behind a line, then drive up to and back into sort of a parking spot. Once you get the approval of the judges, you'll then need to snake around some corners and spiral between some cones into a designated spot. And if you hit a single cone, you might as well stop, because you lose a lot of time off your clock when you do so. But, should you succeed with all of that, then the cones will melt away, as they normally do in these situations, and you'll drive to the small exit box where you will park and thus complete the skill test. This event, as simple as it really is, will probably trip some people up and even make a few quit, but I implore you not to give up here. This event is nowhere near as annoying and tedious as the old Gran Turismo license test, and once you master it, these events aren't really a big deal. Well, except for maybe the last one. The game continues to be a blast to play as you have your choice of a few more cars to unlock, and you drive in various hazardous conditions such as rain, snow, thunderstorms, and even in the dead of night. Oh, and here's a tip. Press the 2 button to turn on your headlights in the night races, and thank me later. But don't expect a cakewalk from Power Drive Rally, because once you get to about event 10 or 11, the game will start to demand that you drive very well. A few minor mistakes or flaws will result in you missing the target time by a fair bit. It gets tough, but it's a doable challenge and one I loved attempting. The difficulty progression was perfect for giving the game longevity without making me want to quit in frustration. They decided to straddle a very thin line that could have resulted in the game being far too difficult, but they rode that line to perfection. Very well done by the developers at Rage. The graphics are clean and the environments are varied. You'll drive in the deserts of Arizona, the rainy hills of England, and the snowy peaks of Sweden. It's definitely not a huge step up over 16-bit graphics, but I don't care. I like the graphics and they serve the game well. I can honestly say that I enjoyed the art and the style of Power Drive Rally. But the lack of a map will turn some people off. It can be easy to miss a corner and not know that a tunnel or bridge is approaching, and you'll spend more time than you want trying to fiddle with the reverse controls to get going again. And in later levels, this is pure death for your money and your timing. The music isn't as clean as the graphics are and mostly sounds like generic, albeit upbeat type stuff. It's fine, but I don't think you're going to remember much of it once the console is powered off. At least I didn't. But I do like the instructions your spotter gives, and overall I find myself listening to that and the environmental effects. Anytime you hit something, the sound of the collision is pretty dull, and lacks the thud and power you would expect from slamming a car into a mountainside, or whatever it is you just ran into. So much like the hills of rally racing itself, we have discussed a lot of ups and downs about Power Drive Rally. So I think it's time we race on over to the pros and cons section and see what our final score and thoughts on Power Drive Rally is. For pros, I really like the arcade-style gameplay. It can be very pick up and play in the basic driving. Most cars can turn on a dime and handle very well. It's unique having to follow brief arrows and listen to your spotter to get around. And it's something I really enjoy about these style of games, and it's done well here. The different courses, events, and weather effects add much more variety than you'll first expect. The money and progression system also helps to add some depth. Also, the difficulty progresses perfectly. It starts out forgiving, but you really need to know your stuff by the end of the game. For the cons, let's start with the graphics being only a teeny tiny bump up from 16-bit stuff. Most people expect more on the Jaguar. The music is generic and forgettable. The crashes are also lacking any real impact, and the sound is just dull overall. Having to manually shift into reverse and back into drive can be a pain, and so can manually turning on your lights during night races. The lack of options in game modes is a detriment. Some people will not be able to get the hang of this game without an option for an overhead map. So with all that said, I think it's fair to give Power Drive Rally for the Atari Jaguar 3 ergonomic 17-button Jag controllers out of 5, which is good on my scale. The game is flawed and lacking in options, and it definitely won't be for everybody, but I think most fans of overhead racing games, and heck, arcade racing games in general, will really appreciate the gameplay and challenge. This is one of those games that you just want to keep playing and trying to get further in. It's just good plain fun. And isn't that what video games are meant to be? Power Drive Rally can go for around $70 to $80 on eBay loose, and usually over $100 for a box copy, but I think it's one of the better games on the Jaguar, and if you own the console, then you'll want to find a way to play it. But now I want to hear from you guys. What do you think of Power Drive Rally? Have you played it before? And if so, do you agree with my review, or did I forget something that really needs to be discussed? Let me know about that stuff and more in the comments down below. And be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and heck, a dislike if you didn't. It's only fair, right? And subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I do a review every weekend for a bunch of different Atari games spanning across their entire history, so chances are you'll find something that you'll like. And I do featured videos every Thursday where I discuss a different topic, like what brought Atari down after the 2600, which new Atari products we should be looking forward to, or even overviews on hardware like the Jaguar CD. So subscribe and check out some of those. Okay guys, I'm the 7800 Pro Gamer, Road Racer and Gold Chaser here at the Atari Network, and I'd like to thank you all for checking out my review on Power Drive Rally. And as always, remember to stay classy, Atarians.